Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It is Jennifer Tarle, and today on the Real Work podcast, I'm excited to welcome Michael Neary. Michael is a speech language pathologist with over 20 years of experience. He is the founder of Chattertots. He specializes in early intervention and parent coaching, and he brings his skill of being a singer-songwriter into the therapy and coaching space and makes it just so much fun. So please join me in welcoming Mike. Hi, Mike. How are you?
Hey, how are you? Good morning.
Good morning. So I am so excited to have you on today. Mike and I have known each other for, I think, 20 years. It's been
Yeah,
a
it's a long time.
long time. We worked together years ago. We met at Chicago Public Schools. And we also worked in early intervention together. So remind me, Mike, you have to tell that story. It's like my favorite story. You know the one. But before we do that, let's start with tell me a little bit about your journey to this point, like kind of a walk me through your resume.
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to undergrad. I remember picking up a psychology major at Ohio State and realizing a couple years in, I was like, well, I'm done with that degree, and I still had some time to go.
Yeah.
So I just started looking for another major to complement my career as a psychologist as I was planning to have. And I found speech and language, and I was like, yeah, I can get that done. So I literally just picked it up kind of on a whim. I remember walking into my first class and I was not prepared for the fact that this is a very female dominated field. I
Yes.
had no idea when I picked it up, and I really walked in and very much was like, oh, okay, I think I'll stay. But anyway, so I ended up going to grad school for speech. That's how much I loved the undergrad. And I really was determined to work with adults. I was kind of felt like that was what I was supposed to do. As you know, most of the male identifying therapists in our field do work with adults or go into academia. And so I kind of felt I needed to follow that. I'm not sure why, because my entire life I have been so natural with kids and I've loved working with kids. So I got my first job right out of grad school and I worked with adults and I hated it. Just it wasn't for me. And
Yeah.
so, I did what I could there and I slowly started trickling into peds. And by the time I left that first job, I was full all peds all the time. And that was the last time I worked with adults professionally in the speech pathology space, I should say. And then I moved to Chicago and got a job with the public schools and met you. And that's kind of where it all started. Since that time, I've worked in public schools, hospitals, outpatient clinics. I spent a lot of time with a prior business doing early intervention. And then I've relocated again to Ohio and went back to the outpatient hospital setting. And about 6 months ago, left that. And here we are starting our second business of my career. So yeah, that's kind of the quick journey of where I've gone. During that time, I've learned how much I love birth to three. I love early intervention. I love parent coaching. I love getting the whole family involved. So it's taken a while to figure out kind of where my true passion lies in this field, but that's kind of what I discovered over those 20 plus years.
Okay. So I have a couple of questions. Number
Yeah.
one, as a theater person, where I went to grad school, theater and speech pathology were in the same college, which I think is interesting. So was it the same way where you went to school? No.
No, I don't think so because for grad school we were in it was in more like allied health
Okay.
type stuff, so it wasn't
Yeah.
in that same vein. No.
Okay. So interesting. And then explain a little bit for people who don't know, what is birth to three? And like, what do you do for therapy? Because people are
Yeah.
what could you do with the
Yeah.
baby? So
Yeah,
tell us.
it is one of the most common questions I get, especially with this new venture where it's not that I won't consult with families of slightly older kids,
Yeah.
especially kids that are developmentally functioning as a 3-year-old. But I get that all the time. Like, whoa, babies don't talk. They're not supposed to talk, yada, 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 right? And so I very specifically use the word communication in most of my
Mhm.
publicity, my website. I want to make it very clear that, yes, language is a part of it, but what we're looking at is their communication. So birth to three is something every state uses it different. I believe in Illinois is early intervention. It's helped me grow here in Ohio. Basically, what it is that 0 to 3 years of age Head Start programs where you're looking at pre-linguistic skills, right? Eye contact, eye
Mhm.
gaze, joint attention. Are they smiling and responding when you talk to them? Are they pointing at things they see? Are they babbling? Are they making early sounds? These are all things that we can look at even before a kid starts talking and using traditional words. And most importantly is the caregiver training, right? So we're there, not as often as we would like to be, or sometimes more than we'd like to be, but is helping the parents and caregivers learn how to look for those signs and do the same type of things that we would do.
Okay, so a couple of things. I get this question on my other YouTube channel from parents. Like, I think parents innately know there's something different about this kid than my others, or like,
Mhm.
I just have this feeling that something's kind of off with my kid. And, oftentimes it is that communication piece, and people just don't really quite know how to describe it. So, two things. Where would someone look? Because I know it's different in every state to
Uh-huh.
find like help for it. Like, what should they Google? And
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
what kind of things should they look for? Like, are there any red flags that should be like, yes, I need to call someone now?
Yeah, I mean, every state is different. So I always tell people, like, if you want to get like state-based resources, Google like early intervention and put your state in, and it'll
Mhm,
give you stuff. A really good place to look is our national governing body. They have a lot of ASHA. They have a lot of great resources about
mhm,
typical speech and language development and communication development, and sort of like milestones that you're looking for.
mhm.
Also, talk to your pediatrician. I think that it's a little difficult in the pediatrician space and the nurse
Yeah,
practitioner space because a lot of them will tell you, "Oh, just wait. Oh, just wait. Oh, just wait." And
yeah.
others will absolutely listen to you.
Mhm.
So I would say like talk to them, because in the off chance that there's someone who's like, actually, no, you should, kind of take a look at this. I think that it would be a good start. I think my one of my biggest missions is also reach out to me. You'll have my
Yeah,
website now. Is helping parents realize that asking questions is not panicking. Asking
yes.
questions does not create the problem, and it's not even necessarily a problem. Asking questions is knowledge, it's power. It helps you understand what you're looking for, it helps you understand what your kid is doing, and it gives you the tools then to work with them and kind of give them that heads up. I've had a lot of people ask me, one of my favorite questions from parents that, you'll show up and one of the parents is all in, and if there's two parents
Yes.
in the home, one is not.
Yeah,
And I will not gender stereotype which is which. It's very different for each family. But
yeah,
you'll get like, well, what are you even doing? What's the
yeah,
difference you're making? Right. And so my whole thing with early intervention is, will they catch up on their own? Maybe. Right. Like
yes,
maybe.
yeah.
But I know as a parent, I would rather know that I'm trying, if I have the means and the time and the resources and to do this, that I'm doing what I can to ensure they have the best shot at catching up than waiting and seeing. And I think that that's one of my big missions right now, is like kind of re-educating people about the benefit of early intervention and why it's important and why we need to start looking early. So kids that are like, to your question about red flags, right? Kids that are a year and they're, not really sharing eye contact, not kind of following your gaze or your point when you're looking at
Mhm,
something. They're not babbling. They're not
yeah,
starting to make those consonants, ba 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 ga ga ga, quasi words, which is things for like, maybe like the first time a kid looks at, the person in their life and goes, "Ma," right? And you're as a
mhm,
parent like, if you go, they just said mom, they just said mama,
yeah,
and you make this a huge thing, that kid's much more likely to do that again, right?
yeah,
If your kid's not doing that by that 9 to 12 month phase, right? That's when you'd want to start to go, maybe I should ask some questions.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I fall. And
Mhm.
honestly, another reason I'm looking at this type of approach is that, well, then you get the red flags and you get the, okay, I'm ready to do this. And then you're on a wait list for 6 to 9 months. And
Yes.
then your kid is 2.5 and
Yeah,
they get evaluated. And by the time they're picked up for services, they have 2 weeks of services and they're 3.
correct.
So I'm looking at doing this a slightly different way in order to avoid the giant wait lists and avoid the like seeing a kid every single week for 6 to 9 months, right? I'm trying to spread it out a bit, do a lot more direct coaching with parents and seeing these kids a little bit less frequently in order to kind of jump in and get involved with more families and have the
Mhm.
work happening at home rather than kids sitting on the wait list the entire time that they would qualify for birth to 3 services.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like a lot of answers to a lot of questions all at once.
No, I love it, and I just wanna add one thing. It's okay as a parent to be a little pushy, and I think a lot of my audience, they are not native to the US. And so it's like a different kind of a culture here. And I think really being pushy with your doctor, and even if your doctor says don't worry and you're worried, call someone like Mike, get a second opinion. Because I'll just give one of my stories.
Mhm.
One of my specialty areas is speech, just the sound part of it. And I can't tell you how many kids I've seen over the years who have needed tubes in their ears. They weren't hearing anything, but they never really had an ear infection. So there were no red flags from like the doctor's perspective. So I'm not saying the doctors were
Mhm.
wrong, right? But like as a parent, and all of the parents that were a little tiny bit pushy, they were right. And once those kids got the help that they needed, either tubes or speech therapy or a combination of all of the above, then they took off and everything was fine. Um, I'm a huge proponent of coaching. It's the model that I use for my adults who want to improve their speaking clarity, especially my adults who are English as a second language speakers. And I am also a huge advocate, which is, I think, why we clicked, Mike. Huge advocate for coaching for parents. So,
Mhm.
give me your thoughts. Why is it so important to coach parents, and what does that look like?
Yeah, so this started from my first job. I remember being fresh out of school and I was like, "I'm gonna change the world. Look at me," right? And I remember
Yeah,
just loving this.
aren't we all?
And and I
Mhm.
realized, like, parents would just show up and I would take their kid to this room, and there was an
Yeah,
observation room, and there were cameras, and they could watch, and they would just, like, leave, and they weren't
yeah,
supposed to, and they would run errands and come back, and so I just started and I'm not even as a parent now, I get it, I understand you're juggling like, at that time, I was like, "What? You know, these parents, how could they?" Now I'm like, I get it.
yeah,
It's exhausting, right? Like, I take my kid to piano lessons, and I usually go in, but sometimes I sit in my car and work because I'm like, "I have so much to do." I get it. But the drop them off and fix them approach is kind of something we used to always say, which is like, here's my kid. They have all
yeah,
these things we're working on. Let me know when they're better, right? Is so fundamentally flawed. First of all, these kids are, I don't like this idea of like fix them, they're broken, right? These kids are
right,
what they are. And we're just trying to help them live and meet their highest potential.
right,
So for me, when I moved into the public schools, that's another difficult space because the parents cannot be there. And so I
correct.
started learning really early that parents have a really bad reputation when they come in for IEP meetings. And I've been guilty of the way I feel about parents when they come in, right? But I started to realize that these parents have no way of knowing, are their kids getting service, how much service, what type of service. So I started doing things to bring the parents in the fold by, sending updates weekly or bi-weekly about what we're doing, sending work home, showing them what we're doing, setting up during parent teacher conferences. Like, a lot of times therapists wouldn't see anyone. I would specifically email out my availability to my entire caseload, and I would have 10 to 12, which is not very many, but more than a lot of other
But a lot,
therapists at,
a
so it
lot.
started off early
Mhm.
on of, I was like, oh, I can get parents involved. So when I went into early intervention, and it's kind of a tenet of early intervention that you're supposed to do caregiver training, I started to realize that a lot of people don't do it. A lot of
Yeah,
people struggle with breaking this mold of taking a bag of toys in, sitting down, playing with the kid while the parent's working, and then saying, any questions? And the parents say no, and then they leave.
mhm,
So I realized in early intervention that I needed to make a change. I needed to really directly bring the parents in, give them so my approach is get them in from the beginning by starting by watching what they're doing. They're like, well, we already had an evaluation. Cool. Yeah. So I'm going to watch a little bit just to make sure that what we saw on the evaluation day is kind of not showing off the best skill, but showing you what your day to day is, because I am going to fold in these strategies to your day to day routine. And so that's kind of how I start. And then I get the parents involved. I try to push whoever's involved: nanny, mom, dad,
mhm,
grandparents, whatever. And so I get them started on that process. And then I give them very specific targets. So it's not just like practice communication, right? It's like, this week you're going to focus on like following your kids lead. So no matter what they do when you're playing in this 15 minutes, follow. Doesn't
yeah,
matter if they abandon a task, follow. And so I do a lot of, and I get down with the kids. If it's virtual, it's a little different, but if it's in person, I model directly and then I kind of pull back and watch. I think that is the approach that I found is great. It's
mhm,
important because I'm not there all the time.
yeah,
I might have 50 kids. I might have 60 kids. I might have 20 kids. I don't know. I'm there to kind of support, show you the next step. And then the people that are involved in this kids every day are the ones that need to be doing this work with them day in and day out. And that's why the coaching, I think, is really the most appropriate way to work with these kids.
Yeah.
It expands our bandwidth. We can get involved with more families. We can help more families. So we're getting a greater reach, and these kids are getting a greater dose of therapy because they're getting it throughout the day with their family, with their caregivers and parents.
Yeah, excellent. Love that. I just want to comment on a couple of things. Follow your child's lead. I want to talk about this more because this is a
Mhm.
struggle for most of my families. But before we
Yep.
get into that, I want to talk about dosage and costs. So, dosage would be we come in once a week as a speech therapist and we're there for an hour, and your kid gets an hour of
Mhm.
therapy.
Mhm.
But if you look at it from everybody in the house, and I think you're the same way, I would even use the dog. Like, the
Oh yeah,
dog was a
100%.
part of therapy, and, like, I've had kids start talking because of their dog.
Mhm.
So, we use everyone in the home to get that kid talking, and then the dosage then is not 1 hour a week, it's literally whenever the kid is awake.
Yep. Yep.
And I also feel very strongly about this. I've had so many families that speech therapy is not covered under their insurance. And I personally don't think that speech therapy is very expensive because I know many, many people who will pay very expensive gym memberships and go to Orange Theory and all these things, but yet they don't want to spend the
Mhm.
money for speech
Yep.
therapy.
Yep.
So I think this is a very cost effective way to provide services. So I've had families that their insurance won't pay. And they're like, look, this is all I can pay. And I'm like, okay, here's your home program. I have
Yep.
had kids
Yep.
that literally in 6 months are done
Yep.
because of that
Yep.
dosage. So I just
Yep.
want to like really drive that home. Like, your model is the like pinnacle of what speech therapy should be. Okay, so all that being said, tell me about follow the lead. Like, what does that
Mhm.
mean a little bit more?
Yeah.
Because parents will say, like, but they're not in charge and, blah, blah, blah. So, what is that?
I love that when parents challenge that. I'm like, but of their playtime, they are. Right. And
Okay.
so,
Mhm.
like, yeah, there's non negotiables. You don't need to follow your kid's lead when it's time to leave for daycare. You don't need to follow your
Yeah.
kid's lead at dinner time. You don't need to follow
Mhm.
your kid's lead. Like, when there's things that need to be done, that's when you are the authoritarian parent. That's where you
Yeah.
are like, let's go, keep them moving. Right.
Yep.
When it's playtime, and I think this is the fundamental problem, parents are busy.
Yeah.
100%. I get it. I don't want to come across as being like, oh, doctors don't refer because they do. Parents don't try because they
Exactly.
do. It's
Mhm.
exhausting. Being a parent is the best and most overwhelming thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
Right. And I've had a lot of weird experiences at work, and this is the hardest one. So I
Yeah.
get it, right? So following their lead, you have to carve out the time. And I tell my parents, start small. It's like when you go running, right? You're not going to go from 0 miles to 12, right? You're going to go
Yes.
from 0 miles to a half a mile. So
Mhm.
carve out time. Maybe that's twice a day for 30 minutes. Maybe that's twice a day for 10 minutes. Maybe it's once a day where you're going to be on their level doing what they want to do. They want to do, not you want to do. And they're in charge that entire time. You don't need to tell them you're in charge. They'll get it. When they
Yeah.
pick an activity and they start playing and you jump right in and do what they're doing and they look at you and then they do something else and you follow that, you can still embed so much language and so much learning in this activity, and they will do better at getting it because it's something they're interested in. And so I have never struggled. Maybe it's my young spirit, maybe it's my ADD, I don't know. I have never struggled with following a child's lead. I struggle more with like a plan a therapy session and sticking to my plan, right? Which is, I love it. I just
Mhm.
follow them. It very much I remember reading a couple books. I do a lot of work with kids on the autism spectrum as well. And I remember reading some books, and there was this, I'm not going to remember the name of the book, which is going to drive me crazy, but there's a kid who, like, he hates when their parents turn, like, no left turns allowed. So anywhere they go, they would have to make all right turns. That's an example of something where I'm like, okay, maybe you need to push back a little bit, right? Because you
Yes.
need to get where you need to go. But then
Yeah.
there's one where the kid likes to take crayons, and he just likes, his play is to hold the crayons and just drop them and kind of laugh and have fun. And so the parent is challenging the kids dropping of the crayons, And it makes it such a big deal that the kid ends up dropping the crayons into the heater vent. And that's when you have to jump in and say, actually, this is what we're not going to do. And I thought to myself, had this parent known and just known that, like, let this dropping be fun. There's so much you can do with that activity. Have it drop into something. Name the colors as they drop. Use silly sounds as it goes, right? Maybe the color that they drop, you then draw on the paper with. And so, like, for me, I remember this example of going, I really wish that parent had not been so overwhelmed. And I get it, I don't have a child with autism. No judgment on this parent's level of being overwhelmed.
Yeah.
But it was one of those examples of following your lead can be a really powerful way of showing this kid, I see you, I get you, I understand what you're doing, I see what you like. I actually like that stuff too. Let's go. And rather than it's playtime, do this puzzle. You
Yeah.
know, it's a very different approach. Clearly, I'm
Yeah.
very passionate about it. I could spend the entire hour talking about follow your lead, but hey,
Oh,
we don't do that.
I can as well. Like, I think it gets down to another way to say it is meet them where they are.
100%.
And I think oftentimes what I would see, at least when I was doing early intervention, and I haven't done it in a while, um, it's been like a year, so I guess it's not that long. But I think that as kids get older, we naturally change the way that we interact with them. And sometimes their ability at communication is a little bit younger. And so meeting them where they are is very helpful and kind of getting that communication growing and going. Um, so what was the problem that you saw with families and why you jumped to founding Chattertots? And I also see that you're doing some like things at the library. Like, what kind of a
Mhm.
need are you seeing with your parents and what are they loving?
Yeah, I mean, to be fully honest, like I love being a speech therapist. I've been one for a long time, but I'm
Mhm,
also very burnout. I think
mhm.
that unfortunately education and healthcare systems are really productivity based,
Yes.
kind of workhorse based, and they're sort of meant to like they do eventually burn you out. And I think that there are people that are stuck. If you're a teacher, if you're a nurse, if you're a doctor, you're kind of stuck in that field, in
Mhm.
that job. I feel like for me, I was like, no, I'm unhappy right now. I personally need to make a change. Jumping around place to place, 20 years into your career, you know, is not easy. My wife was in a very different field, and her experience with getting a job when we moved was like interviewed, went well. She's also amazing and really qualified at what she does. But they're
Mhm.
like, great, here's your benefits package, here's your salary, kind of right where she left off. In our field,
Uh-huh.
oh, you worked in a different state, none of that counts. And so it was a lot of this like starting over again. And I'm not talking starting over like meeting new people. I'm talking like pay drop, time
Yeah.
off drop, life balance was rough. And I loved the job I had when I moved here. I still
Mhm.
go back and work there occasionally, but I just needed to make a change for me and my family. So that's kind of a sidebar about what
No,
was the
but that's
question you
great. I
actually
love
asked?
when you bring that in
You
because I think oftentimes
oh
career
yeah,
decisions are made based on your circumstances. So I love this.
100%.
Keep going.
And
Yes.
I forgot the question. There's my brain goes, but I remember it now. And
It's
so
okay.
luckily, again, I am speaking from a place of being very privileged. You know, my wife has a great job, and she was able to say, "I got this for a while. Follow what you need to do, because if I'm not happy, our family struggles, right?"
Yep.
And so
Mhm.
I'm very thankful to Joanna for that, for just like letting me always chase whatever dreams I'm going after. Like
Uh-huh.
it's you know, someone like me needs someone like that in your life to kind of
Yeah.
ground you a bit, in addition to and like continue tell you to keep going. So my thought was the problem I saw was Waitlists was, I mean, you know, like in our field,
Yeah.
if you're doing traditional speech therapy as a speech therapist, you're very limited to who you can see based on where they live, based on their access. And so my thought was to sort of kind of move out of the speech therapy space a bit.
Mhm.
And I'm bringing that entire background with me. What I'm doing is I'm not working with the kids anymore. I
Yeah.
am working with their parents. I am teaching them, educating them. And my hope is to help kids that are missing out on critical time. And I don't mean critical meaning if the parents don't do it, these kids are
Right.
scarred forever. Critical meaning the parents finally decided to take a step, and
Yeah.
then they're met with a red tape of, oh,
Yeah.
well, you only get 10 visits a year. So I don't even, insurance isn't even something I'm dealing with. I did it at my last business. I'm not doing it.
I'm over
Um,
it too.
and
Yeah.
I'm not doing it. And that you get 10 visits a year, or oh, it'll take, 5 months to get this pre-approval, or you finally get approved and then there's no therapist available because we have so many kids in need. And so my thought was to get rid of all of that red tape, can be a direct line to me, like through my website, through any of my socials, and to set up appointments, to kind of get involved with as many families as I can. Yes, it's private pay, but it's at the thing where my whole thought is, and I'm very honest about this, I don't imagine seeing you every week for a year, right? I
Yeah.
imagine seeing you a handful of times
Yes.
and spreading those out based on each individual kid. There's no set formula. I have lists of what I want to do at session 1 and my goal for session 3 if we get there, and my goal for session 4 if we need it. But it's very individualized. I don't put it anywhere. I don't show anyone, because I'm going to make changes based on what that family needs. So that was my thought of moving into this space, was getting out of traditional speech therapy, which again, I bring that all with me and I love it. And there are kids. I also have a category of kids that need traditional speech therapy.
Yeah.
And I've had a couple people reach out to me and I'm like, this is not an appropriate model for your kid. And this is why.
Yeah.
Here are some resources to get you started, but this is, and it costs them nothing because I do a 15-minute consultation for free to start, to make sure that this model is a good fit for you. It's not because I only want to take kids that are easy. It's because if I have a kid with, autism who's going to need ongoing support, yeah, I can be a bridge to services for you, but you're probably
Mhm.
going to need services, and so kid with articulation issues, I mean, I can give you a little bit of coaching, but that's not exactly what Chattertots does.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my reason of moving into this space a bit. And then I decided, like, one of my biggest barriers currently is, as I've stated, I've relocated a couple years ago and went right into the hospital setting, kind of threw myself into hospitals and theater here and just kind of did it. And so I don't really have a network of speech therapists slash preschool teachers slash parents, because I'm a little older now, my kid's in middle school,
Yeah.
who excuse me, are just like who I have access to. And so one of my biggest struggles now has been access, and I have been working really hard on building up my social media presence. One thing, my sister's an awesome person, and she does marketing and advertising. So she's offered, actually, I'm like so lucky. My other sister's an attorney, so she's helped. My brother's in education. I just had so many people helping. But my one sister who's in marketing, Lindsay, she had a meeting with me and was like, here's all the things that you really need to do. And one of her ideas was get involved in your community. You already are, but now get involved with the people that you need. And so I reached out to the library, and they were not able to let me come in. They have a whole program where they use their people, but they gave me a list that was amazing. They were like, here's a list of coffee houses and places that you should reach out to in your community. And so I reached out to a couple, and one was like, oh, you can't, we just signed a contract with someone else. I was like, that's fine, no big deal. Because I was like, contract, I'm volunteering to go in and do this, but hey,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And so the other one, which is a wonderful coffee house here in Westerville, Family Room, they reached out immediately and were like, we would love it. Let's go. And so we have kind of come up with this, like, we're starting once a month. And then it might go up to twice a month if it goes well. And again, it's free. It's just for families to come in. It's targeted at kids who are developmentally 4 and under. Again, one of those like flexibility things is I'm going each week with 2 books planned, because if I show up and these kids are all 18 months or under, I'm going to do book A.
Yeah.
If they're wide range, so I kind of like getting involved. In my thought is, I'm not directly like recruiting people there. Of course, it's getting my face out there, showing people my style, showing them my personality, because that is my brand, and showing them the way I engage with their children and with them, and sort of kind of get the ball rolling, is kind of how that all came to be.
Okay, so first of all, everyone needs to reach out to you because you are like the best when it comes to parent coaching. And I love what you said about dismissal. I think in like the traditional speech therapy world, you have this like intake therapy. It's very structured. You have to meet these goals, and you're still doing that in your coaching. It's
Mm-hmm.
just a little more fluid. And I do think that, at least in my opinion, and I think we're saying the same thing, is that oftentimes this is what many, many kids need, is that little push. And then they're kind of, they take off. And I do want to get into some of your innovations with your therapy. You are very dynamic in your sessions. You are so much fun. So, Where does that come from? I know you're in theater. How did you get into that? And like,
Uh-huh.
how do you bring these two things together?
I I fought like my personality and a lot for like a long time, even as a kid, right? When you're an active individual, like back in the 80s, like, like it wasn't ever diagnosed with anything, but I mean, my activity level was through the roof. There's
Yeah.
videos of us as a kid and my brothers really calmly playing, and I'm just zipping around and poking the camera person and like, watch me, look at me, right? And so I've always had this kind of like energy. And I remember that when I first started working with kids in middle school, I worked at like a summer camp. I started realizing like, and I was obviously still a kid then, but I always was able to relate to kids. And I think for me, like I like relating with them in a way that I don't do a lot of like baby talk and all that like stuff. That's just not my style. It's wonderful and there's great things about it, but I kind of treat them like they're just little adults in
Hmm.
the nicest way possible. And I just sort of like put myself as if we're not peers. Like I'm definitely in charge when things need to be in charge, but when we're not, when we're just playing, like they kind of look at me as a peer and as a friend. And I think that like for me, it's like being able to be on their level and really be in it with them is sort of like the way it kind of came to be. And so I've never really struggled with like when I walk into a space, I'm more nervous. I used to be more nervous about working like their parents. What are they going to say? There is a lot of difficulties in our field. Being a guy, sometimes you do get met with like, oh, we'd rather work with someone else. That I've had a few times in my career. I'm like, that's fine. As a guy, this is one of the few spaces that I feel like I know what other people that don't look like me and are not male go through. I don't know. I can't fully relate to it because this is the one aspect, but
Hmm.
I don't want to sound like I'm complaining about it. There are just times when I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. It's not for you. So breaking down the barrier a bit of being a guy in early childhood has been a little bit of a struggle, but that's kind of something I got rid of a long time ago. Um, and I've always done theater. I've always done music. So speech and language is like, and communication is very um, has like melody and pitch and rhythm. And so I've sort of just brought all of that into my work with kids. And I think the theater part has really helped me learn how to just like think on my feet. If you're on stage and something goes wrong,
Yeah.
you just got to keep going. My favorite example, which I always think about when I do therapy now, is like I was in an original show in Chicago, and they would like hand you new pages before you went on stage because they would rewrite stuff because it was a new work, and
Okay.
they rewrote one of my scenes, and it was like right after my second song, and I was the villain, which is funny because that's the only one and only time I've ever played the villain. But so they handed me, and I'm standing on stage after my song, and I'm breathing and looking, and no one's saying anything. And I'm sitting there going, someone forgot their line. And all of a sudden I was like, oh,
Oh, that was
I was
me.
like, it's my line. And so
Yeah.
I'm just looking around at like 18 people looking at me. And this feels like at work, right? Like you're sitting there, you tried something, it didn't work, and everyone's staring at you and you're like, what do I try next? Right. Or it didn't go as planned. And I remember looking at them and I kind of quickly was like, everyone's looking at me, and the idea is I need to leave the stage and they all need to be taken off, right? Because I've arrested them. And I just said something like, take them away, right? The actual line was a little bit longer, a little bit more detailed, but it did what it needed to do. I think about that when I'm working with my kids, right? I do something, it doesn't quite land, and rather than panic and abandon, I sort of like just shift on to the next thing really seamlessly. I do a lot of coaching and training with new therapists as well. Like I don't like apologize to the parents. I don't really apologize to the kids because nothing was wrong. I just
No.
shift into the next mode, and the kids are like, "Oh, now we're back in sync," and we keep on going, right? Just like happened to me when I was on stage. So I think that I don't consider myself being on when I'm with my kids because that when I'm in a show, I'm playing someone else. I consider myself so. I don't like the analogy of the theater because I'm definitely being myself when I'm with your family. But it's that idea of just being creative and flexible and always ready, kind of like you can't really be prepared. You don't know what these kids are going to say, what they're going to do, or what they're going to choose. You just have to trust your instincts and your knowledge and just go with it. It's kind of the way that I bring that theater into this space.
Okay, I love that. So I have another interview with Vince Ritchie, and he teaches improv for adults. And I love what he says because it's basically about learning how to be human. And I think so many times people are so afraid to kind of like make a mistake. And then there's a lot of apologizing, and then you're trying to fix things. And it's like you go with it. So it's interesting to me that theater, parent
Mhm.
coaching, improv. It sort of all has this through line of just
Uh-huh.
get out there and do it.
Well,
This
and I think the
issue,
apology
go ahead.
thing sorry, I think the
Mhm.
apology thing is interesting because 100%, if something were wrong, if I did something wrong or
I would
whatever, I would
apologize. Yeah.
apologize. But I
Mhm.
think about, like, I'm writing music right now, and that's for a different day, and I kept saying, like, "Gosh, it's wrong, it's wrong. Oh, I'm so frustrated." And my son, I love kids, he's 11, he's like, "How can it be wrong? It's brand new. You are writing it. You
Oh,
might not like it, but
brilliant.
it's
Mhm.
not wrong." And I thought so I have that day when he said that, I've actually, like, had more luck writing additional songs because I'm
Yeah.
sort of like, just get it out there and you can change it and edit it later. But I think about that, right? Like when I'm with my kids, it's not like what I did was like this idea of this play or this, thing that I decided we were going to do together was wrong. It just didn't click with this kid. So it's time to like shift focus to the next thing. But that's when I'm like, when I talk about not like apologizing for it, it's like as soon as I break it and say, that didn't work and here's why, and I'm going to try this, then this interaction is broken. And so I want to go, and now when I get something that's working and things are flowing and it's going, that's when I'm going to like fold the family in, right? And so I think it's that idea of like not feeling this need to like over explain right away with the parents while you and the kid are kind of figuring things out.
Yeah.
Is sort of I try to do the same thing when parents are playing with the kid, right? Is not like insert myself really choppily like every couple seconds because it just breaks their flow. It's more about like getting the idea of it and then kind of coaching and after it's like when there's a break in the action, if that makes sense.
I love it. So I think what I'm hearing is it's a lot about reframing
Mhm.
your kind of mental um, blueprint of the situation. So it's not necessarily bad. It's just, it's not what you expected. And
Yeah.
we have to get into this story before I forget. I keep
Oh,
writing
yeah.
myself a note. So, so again, Mike and I worked together for years and we both were doing early intervention. And I have this kid.
I
And
think I remember who he is now. It took me a little bit to get there because I've had so
okay, it
many
was
kids.
right.
I know who you're
We
talking
saw
about.
him, it was on,
Uh-huh.
like, Diversity by the
Uh-huh. Oh,
park,
yeah.
right? There was a
Yeah.
daycare
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
and I was getting nowhere with this kid. This was, like, 3 months in, and I was like, "I don't know," and I was talking to the mom, and I'm like, I have concerns, like, we might need more assessments because I'm just not seeing anything," and she was like, "But he's doing all this stuff at home, like, not what I want him to be doing, but, like, all of these things," and then like, it was just I was stymied, and so I talked to you, and you were doing early intervention at the time, and I was like, "Do you mind just taking this case? Like, I'm not getting anywhere," and I was getting frustrated. So, you took over the case, and I vividly remember you calling me after your session and saying, "Okay, this is the kid, he looks like this, and this is where he was, and is this the kid that you were telling me about that wasn't doing anything? Because we had this, like, amazing session and all of these things." And so, this really gets into, like, I wasn't doing anything necessarily wrong.
Mhm.
I was doing all the right things. It just wasn't right for that situation, and so I still don't feel badly about it. I feel like it's one of my
No.
best therapy moments ever, which was just like, "This is not working. Here's this new person," and then
Mhm.
it worked. So, can you talk to a little bit about that and, like, how do you help parents get through that when maybe one parent is really good at it, but the other parent might not be as good? And is it sometimes the kid, not the
Yeah.
parent?
I think it's first of all, I think it's amazing that number one, you identified that like this fit was not great for you and this family.
Yeah.
As a therapist, sometimes we feel that we just have to go, go, go. And I've had kids that I'm like, you know what, this is just not, we're not clicking. Maybe the kid's afraid
No.
of me, maybe
Yeah.
whatever. So I love that you were not afraid to be like, because it is as a therapist, when you're like, I don't know how to help this kid, I don't know what to do. It's a difficult moment. So I love
It's
that you took that
frustrating.
step. And
Mhm.
I've been on the other side of it as well, like 100%.
Yeah.
So I love that you're like, something is not clicking. Like, worst case, you send them to me, the same thing happens. And we're like, okay,
Correct.
now we know
Now
there's
we know
something.
we have data. Yeah.
Right. This, if I'm remembering the exact situation of this kid was better with dad than mom.
I
And
think so.
so a lot of the sessions were you, mom, and the kid. And so like for some reason, again, this is not typically what we see, me going in as me and being a little bit more like dad in appearance and in style of
Yeah.
play, style of
Mhm.
engaging, sort of like unlocked something for this kid. And I will
Yeah.
say his was remarkably fast. Like other kids, it would take a little longer.
Yeah.
So this kid, I think it was, there's still some questionable things. And I think there's still some denial and things that he could be diagnosed with. But
Yeah.
honestly, when I left him, he was doing great. So I'm kind of like, you know what? If he doesn't get diagnosed, he'll just be a quirky kid. That's fine. Aren't we all?
Yeah.
But I just remember that being a thing where because I think if I'm remembering correctly, this is a long time ago.
It was.
I did a session with dad, and that's when things really made sense to me. And then I did a session with both parents, and when I tagged mom in, it was just everything shifted. And
Mhm.
what I came to learn was that mom and dad both had pretty busy, hectic, like, kind of high position jobs. And mom was just home more. And so mom ended up having to do a lot of the like day-to-day stuff in addition to her job. And she was exhausted. And they had
Mhm.
built some kind of routines and some interactions that weren't the most productive. And so when dad was around, and this was a great dad, he was super around when he could be, he everything was just a little bit more chill and a little bit more
Yeah.
relaxed. And that's exactly my style, is to like
Mhm.
empower the kid and make them feel super comfortable. And so I'm thinking that was a big part of it, was that like, again, and it's not that you weren't doing these things, right? And also we all have a very different skill set, right? And so
I'm
like
gonna
you were
jump
like,
in. You just said something that, like, was an unlock for me. I think that I was getting more stressed as it went along because I was literally getting nowhere with this kid, and kids
mhm,
sense the stress,
mhm.
and if you're stressed, they pick up on it, and they just don't
Oh
want
yeah.
to do what they don't wanna be with you, is I think the
Mhm,
bigger takeaway for me is that you become sort of like, "Why would I wanna be with you? You're not fun.
mhm,
You're
mhm.
stressed out." Even though they don't have the words for it, they definitely feel it. So, that's a really
100%. And
I
I
just
think
thought about that.
you have to hold on. So like for me, I always say like, follow the lead. And I don't want people to think that like, in sessions it's like anything goes, the kids
Right.
are in charge, right? I kind of visualize my sessions as a circle,
Mhm.
right? And anything that happens within this circle is the child leads and fun happens. And if they stay in that circle the entire session, we are just having fun. I'm following their lead. I'm bringing the parents in. As soon as they cross outside of it, and that's not a physical circle meaning like behavior and expectations. As soon as they cross
Yeah.
outside of that circle, they're doing something unsafe. They're hitting someone, they're throwing something, whatever, unless it's a ball and I know it's coming. Whenever they cross outside of the kind of like the rules, and you set those rules by like responding to them appropriately, as soon as they step outside, I kind of shift out of being their play partner and their friend into then being that grown up who's like, letting them know what to do. And if they're in this circle and we're like making them do specific things just because we want them to, or saying no to everything, that circle's just going to keep, like, they're going to get smaller and they're just not going to be having as much fun. And I think that for me is like kind of the idea of like, I can stay really unstressed when we're both having fun in that kind of circle of fun or whatever you want to call it. And it's easy to, when they go outside of it, it's not stress and it's just me going, well, now it's my chance to jump in and kind of redirect this. And so that's what I work with parents on too, is getting them to understand you're not like, we've all seen kids that run the show.
Uh-huh.
That is not the goal of this type of approach.
Right.
That is
Mhm.
the goal for play. That is the goal of why should we be in charge of a kid's play? Right? Do you want them to pick what we watch I mean, sometimes they do, but do you want them to pick
Right.
what we watch on TV? Do you
Mhm.
want them to tell you what books to read? Do you want them to make your playlist? Right? So it's the
Right.
idea of like those are your things that bring you joy and you learn during those because you're having fun.
Yeah.
Similarly, that is their time to learn. That is their fun. And letting them be in charge of that time is super important. And you'll probably see better compliance and better um, interactions outside of that playtime if they feel like that is truly their time to it all comes back to play, right?
Good,
So
yeah, good point. I could keep talking for hours. You are coming back on. First of all, you need to come back on to talk about Mike is writing a musical, which
uh-huh.
you need to come on to talk about that.
Yeah.
I would also love to have you back on to have a discussion about books for both adults and for kids. So let's
Mhm.
tease that. Do you have any book recommendations for parents or for books for their kids that you're just loving?
So I give the most annoying answer because
Okay.
my big pitch is that there are better types of books but it's not the book, it's what you do with it.
You
Similarly,
help.
people
Yes.
people say, "What do you buy for Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever?" It's not about what you buy, it's what you do with what you buy. So I put a whole series up on my Instagram about like best old school holiday gifts for kids, and it was like such a teaser because people wanted specifics, and it was like art supplies, and here's why. Books though, so for example, this story time that I'm doing, I have two types of books. I have one which is geared for this like the younger kids. It's not a huge story based book. There's colorful pictures on the page. There may be flaps or maybe textures that these kids can get their hands on so they engage a little bit longer, right? So those are really good, like the board books, like any of the Eric Carle books,
Yeah.
or I think my son loved Dear Zoo when he was younger. That was like one of his go-to classics because every page it like gives you a hint and then you open and see it. And then the older kids, like 2 to 3, you want a little bit more of a story. You want them to start to kind of get that there's a beginning and an end. They still have really colorful pictures. They still have, bright or like maybe the text is bigger on the page so they can see it more. So you can point to it, start to show them what words are in a book. They're not reading yet, but kind of showing them what they are. And so that's for me, like I don't necessarily, because you could hand me any book and I could make it work with my kids. I know that I was talking to my son about this because he had books that he just loved as a kid. And it was things that had repetition. So like that's where books like Brown Bear are so important because they do a lot of repetition and it gives a kid a chance to like learn during that repetition. Or books that are just silly. Because my whole thing with reading, again, this will be another time, is like it's not about finishing the book. It's about the time you spend together. It's about the interaction. It's about, and I'm a really big fan of like when you're reading with a kid, I don't let other people's children sit on my lap. So this is where this came out of, but I think it's really important is when we're reading, if you're here looking at me, so much more is gained from this book than if you're like this. And yeah, we're sharing the page, but you're missing out on all of this interaction. So, but that's for another day. So my annoying answer is there's no specific books. It's about where your kid is and what you do with them and how you read with them. And I put a lot of stuff about reading up on my Instagram page just because it's something that I feel parents really struggle with.
Yeah, they do. Let's definitely have.
Yeah. I'll do more answers on the next one. I'll make a list.
Do that. Okay. Now, one of the things that I love to ask everyone is like, you've helped me so much. I would not be where I am today without everyone helping me. I'm so incredibly blessed. So is there a person who has really helped you in your life get to where you are?
Yes. I mean, there's so many. I mean, it's kind of a cliche answer, but I've already alluded to this, but I was thinking about this, that Joanna, my wife, I've been with her for a long time. She has always been that one. Like I have big dreams. I always come up with like what I want to do next. And I have a hard time being settled, not in our marriage. I'm very settled there, but I have a hard time being settled professionally.
Yeah.
I always have things I want to do. And I think a lot of times, like if I were, didn't have another person here to bounce ideas off of, or just to be fully transparent, another income to rely on, it would be a lot harder for me to chase these dreams and go after stuff and make the change and put myself out there. And then when I'm sort of spiraling, like, oh, things aren't working, things aren't going, she's like, I'm like, it's been so long. And she's like, it's been like a month. Like she's really good at like bringing me kind of back down and sort of helping me see the reality of the situation, but while also inspiring me to keep going. And similarly, like having my son, I run stuff by him. He's 11. He's, just this great kid, but like that perspective of a kid is so helpful because things that I see as a huge deal and I'm really stressed about, he kind of brings it back down to it's really not that big of a deal. So those are two, I mean, obviously, and I also remember my first mentor, her name is Julie at my first job. She one day handed me a paper bag and said, this is all you get to use today for your next 3 sessions. Have fun. And
I love it.
I at the time I was like, I'm still in contact with her. I think she moved out to North Carolina. She's a wonderful therapist. I remember that moment feeling like this is terrible. And I remember how much I learned that day. And whenever things are hard, I think back to that day and of like just really pushing myself to be creative and to figure things out as I went. And I think that's really shaped kind of who I've become as a therapist. So I was very fortunate to be paired with her at my first job. I think that she's a great advocate for new clinicians. And yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, where can people find you, either professionally or for your musical abilities? Are there multiple
Yeah.
places to find you?
Yeah. So my professional website, chattertotsllc.com. Um, and everyone's like, "Oh, how'd you get the name?" I don't know. We just thought it sounded fun. Like it's about kids,
Fun.
they're talking.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
Chattertots is one word, LLC. Similarly on Instagram and Facebook, they'll be at Chattertots LLC and on YouTube. And then for the music side of it, you can follow me at Michael Neary, and I'll kind of send you to our newest project, which we'll tease a little bit too. Is just a brand new musical. My friends wrote the book and the lyrics. Katie Munger and Michael Ruhrman, and then I wrote the music and lyrics, and it's called Hoboken the Musical. So Hoboken is in the city in New Jersey. You can follow at Hoboken Musical on Instagram as well. We're just rolling out stuff on that show. So you can find me on all of the places.
Okay, we will put all of those links
So
in the
many.
description below. Mike, this was a delight. It was so amazing seeing you. Thank you so much for taking the time. And everyone, we will have Mike back on because I could literally just sit and talk to you
I
for
know. I feel
hours.
like
We have so many things to discuss.
we could just have we would just have a podcast of you and I talking about random stuff for hours on end. I feel like it would be, maybe no one would listen, but it would be really good for me and really good for you to like just talk
I
about the
was
world.
listening because I think we're interesting, but that's a whole
I do
other
too.
story.
Hey,
So,
but we're speech therapists. We of course think we're interesting.
I could talk to myself all day. I know that's
Same.
like that's a whole nother story. So
I'm either talking to
Mike,
myself or my dog who's laying under my feet.
oh,
So
my dog is laying right here too. She always sits here and she's so kind. She waits until the end and then she'll come over and say hi. Does your dog do the same thing?
I'm surprised he hasn't barked at things walking by. He's a little unstable.
Well, my girl, she is a Yorkie mix and
Hmm.
she is a protector. So I'm just
Yep. Yep.
fortunate that UPS or the post office
Same.
person hasn't
Same.
come because
Yep.
she loses her ever
That's
loving mind. And she's this little tiny thing.
that's mine. I have a
She's here to
Chihuahua
protect
mix.
us. Yeah,
Chihuahua mix. He's the same. Oh, he
protector.
acts like he's the biggest dog ever. So yeah.
Yeah, she thinks she's big and she's not. She's just like this
100%.
wee little thing. So, all right, Mike. Well, it's so great seeing you
So
and
good catching
let's
up.
be in touch. Okay, take care,
Okay.
everybody. Have a
You
great
too.
day.
Bye.
Bye.